It was a busy weekend in the NFL and for the Eagles specifically. Football at 4, John McMullen at JF McMullen, Mike Gill, Hunter Brody, live inside Matt Blatt Kia Studios, where we're in like multiple studios right now. I'm here, Hunter's there. Johnny Max on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, and he joins us now, where there's a lot of Eagles news to dive into. And I just saw you tweet, John, that Javon Hargrave will speak at 4:15 on a conference call. So we'll learn more about him, I guess, for tomorrow's edition. But let's start with the weekend that was with, number one, a player gone, which was Nelson Agholor. He signed a one-year deal to go to Oakland. And we kind of opened up the show with, Nelson, a tumultuous career to say the least. I don't know that he was a fan favorite by any stretch, but a very important part of that Super Bowl team. But I kind of blame the coaching staff more for Nelson's shortcomings, more so than Nelson. Yeah, he had his issues, but I think the team didn't utilize him to, I'll use a Gabe Kapler term for you here. They didn't optimally use him as much as they probably could have.
Yeah, I don't know if I can blame the coaching staff. I look at Nelson and I see a really talented guy. Obviously, he's a former first-round pick, tremendously athletic, great speed. I always laugh when people say the Eagles need speed at wide receiver. They had a guy who can run. He just couldn't catch the football consistently, and that's an issue, obviously, at the receiver position. So, I've gotten to know Nelson over the years. He's an extremely hard worker. I think people would be surprised by just how much he works at his craft and tries to improve. But I don't think this was the proper spot for him. Just the football crazy nature of Philadelphia, the East Coast in general. He took the criticism hard, and I mean really hard. It stuck with him. And we always talk about it, mainly at the cornerback position. You have to have that mentality, forget about the last play, move on to the next, no matter if it's good or bad. Nelson's the kind of guy who would let everything wear on him, and then if he made a mistake, that would mushroom into 2 mistakes and 3 mistakes. I think this coaching staff tried everything. Outside, inside, move them around, use them as a movement player, jet sweep, that kind of thing, orbit motion. Just didn't work out. The one caveat I would put on that from the coaching standpoint is just the constant changes in the position coach. Every year a different guy. So I think that part of it is legitimate, but I don't think you could have had the best receivers coach in the history of the world. I don't think it was going to make much difference, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's going to be a felt loss. I just feel like, and we've talked about this over the years, John, that he was not good at tracking the ball. He was not a sure-handed guy, but where he was best was playing the slot, catching the ball about 7 yards down the field, turning his body upfield and making guys miss, and he had a good little wiggle, and as you mentioned, he had some quickness, good speed when he was in the open field. Like, if unfortunately others around him didn't get hurt, it would have probably allowed him to kind of settle into that spot more, and he probably would have been I think this is a good offense for him in Oakland, I think.
Yeah, and I think more than that, I think it's the environment. I think it's going to be a little bit more relaxed, and I think that's going to be helpful to him. I really do. I don't think he's ever going to be a star player. He just doesn't catch the football consistently enough. He just, as you mentioned, with tracking the football, he just doesn't do it naturally. So I think there's certain limitations, and they're going to go forth with him into any city that he goes into. But I do think, most famed this past season, the guy catching babies, like Agholor, that kind of stuff is just, and I'm not going to say it's only Philadelphia because I think it's the entire East Coast, but this is a football crazy town. This is a football crazy environment. They take this stuff seriously, and Nelson is sensitive. And I don't know any other way to describe it. it hit him, and he took it seriously, and it hit him hard. And I just think he needed out of this environment. I really do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You can see that mentally he definitely lost confidence. And once that confidence was lost, it was tough to get out of it. It would just spiral down. But Gil and I talked about this earlier once we started the show, and it's just so weird that you move him from the inside to the outside. It's obvious that he's better in the inside in the slot. But when you have no other options, when you have no other speed guys, you have to put your fastest player out there to try and get some separation and to try and stretch the field. I don't know if I necessarily agree with Gil where he blames the coaching staff more, because if you look at some of those passes where he missed on the outside, like, these are passes and you're in the NFL and you're a wide receiver. Like, how do you drop that pass against the Falcons? How do you miss those passes? You are an NFL receiver, so inside or outside, how is it to this level where he just can't catch the ball?
No, I agree with that, and you bring up that particular play in Atlanta. Yeah, I mean, you're an NFL receiver, you got to make that catch, and especially a high-level NFL receiver, especially a guy who was once a first-round pick and is supposed to excel in this league. You can't not make that play. So, look, it would have been better for him, no question, if Deshaun Jackson was healthy and playing on the outside, Alshon Jeffrey was healthy and playing well on the outside, and he could situate in the slot. But I don't think it has, to be honest, I think it has more to do with him being the third option at receiver and not having the pressure of being a number one option, which, due to all the injuries, he was early in the season at a certain point. And that's the issue. He can't live up to those expectations. So if you go all the way back to his pedigree as a first-round pick, well, if you're picked at that level, you're expected to be a number one receiver, at worst a high-level number two. Nelson was never that. He was never going to develop into that. So as the years went by, you started to situate him and place him into that complementary role. And certainly I think that would have been better for him, but it would have been better for him more because he wouldn't have gotten the football. He wouldn't have gotten the traffic. He wouldn't have been expected to make those types of plays more than inside versus outside.
All right, so Agholor is in Vegas now. He will be a member of the Raiders. Let's go to Jatavius Brown, formerly of the Chargers, a one-year deal, starter for 3 seasons there, backup last year. He's 26 years old. He kind of has the feel of like a Camus, like an undersized linebacker who can, I think he might be a little bit more versatile, but is this a guy they expect to get a lot of snaps, or how do you see Jatavius Brown working into Jim Schwartz's defense?
Well, I don't know. He signed, as you mentioned, he's coming off his rookie deal. He signed for the veteran minimum. So it's not like they're counting on this guy, even to the point we talked about in the past. This organization has missed on some free agent signings at that position. Last year it was L.J. Fort, who went on actually to play pretty well for Baltimore. And then before that, you had Corey Nelson. People forget about him, but he signed a far more significant deal at the time and was expected to be part of the defense, never materialized. This guy is I think you default to him, he's going to be a core special teamer. And then you look at this linebacker position, and somebody's got to play. And right now it's Nate Gary and T.J. Edwards. And if you were to look up and down the off-season rosters, now you say, granted, it's only March, but right now, if you look at every roster in this league at the linebacker position, Eagles would probably be 32. That's how bad it is. So somebody has to play at linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles. Ultimately, I think they're going to draft somebody, maybe as high as the second round, certainly not the first round. But somebody's got to play. And he'll be in that equation if they're not able to add significant bodies. But if you're a fan, you hope he's not in that equation. Let's put it that way. You hope he's just playing special teams.
So Jatavius Brown signed this weekend, a guy who's a speed linebacker, not a big linebacker. And then Will Parks signed, formerly of the Broncos, 1-year deal, was a 6th-round pick. Another kind of bit player guy. Now, we had Nick Ferguson on earlier. He thinks that the Eagles kind of stole a guy here. He likes what he brings to the table. He thinks that he can be a player who does play starter snaps. Are the Eagles looking at Will Parks in that role?
No, I think Jalen Mills is going to get the first opportunity to earn that role. That's the goal. That's the plan. But I do think it's a little bit more in the fact that Parks was brought in as a safety net, no pun intended, that if it doesn't work out, he can play the position. He's got some versatility. He's played as an extra defensive back. He's played both single high. He's played box safety. So he can do a lot of different things. And he's a Philadelphia native. He took less money from the Eagles, had at least 2 offers. And he would have made about $2 million a year. So he's a little bit of a higher level than we just talked about with Brown. So, but he's not brought in here to be a starter. The plan A, is that Jalen Mills will be the starter, and he would settle in as that third safety, who, as we've seen over the Jim Schwartz era, gets significant snaps. I mean, whether it's the big nickel, whether it's injuries at the cornerback position, Jim always ends up playing that third safety quite a bit during the season, and certainly week to week, depending on the game plan, depending on the receiver package the opposition will use. So I think he'll be a part of this defense, but the Eagles didn't bring him in to be a starter.
Let me ask you then, John McMullen. Jenkins out. McLeod here, Mills moving, Parks, Slay. You like this secondary today better than the one that Jim Schwartz had last year?
Well, it's kind of, do you like? I do, and it's the real question is who's more of an impact, Darius Slay or Malcolm Jenkins? Because you gained a good corner and you lost a good safety. And Malcolm, obviously, at 32, probably a descending player, whereas Slay, you could argue, some have argued he's also descending, but it's a little bit younger at 29. But this team has struggled so much at the cornerback position. As I said, he by far is the best corner that Jim Schwartz has had in Philadelphia, and I don't think it's particularly close. So he's a lot better. And I think when you look at this team and the confidence they have in Jalen Mills and what Jim does at the safety position, I think they'll be able to cobble it together at least to be competent on the back end. So I would say slightly better, but you could argue both ways.
Do you think it's possible that they actually trade their first-round draft pick for someone like Yannick Ngakoue for a defensive end, 24-year-old? I know that there's some buzz just by the fans. Obviously, nothing being reported.
Well, I think it's Ngakoue more than anything else.
Yeah.
He's you're
right.
On Diggs.
Right.
He's trying to force his own trade and get to Philadelphia. Now, this has me torn, actually, because Howie has consistently said, both in front of the cameras and behind the cameras to us, he's consistently said this team has to get younger. He's consistently said we need more draft picks after 2 consecutive years of only 5 picks. And he's already traded 2 of those picks, which we started at 10. Now we're down to 8. And if you trade the first-round pick, you're down to 7. And you're almost in the same situation you were over the past 2 years. That's one side of the coin. The other side is, as you mentioned, 24-year-old edge rusher. And as you go to the positions valued in this league, it goes quarterback, edge rusher. You either get to the quarterback, or you get to the quarterback. That's the cliche in the NFL. So to get a 24-year-old high-level edge rusher, it's probably better than anything you're going to get at 21. So it's a really difficult decision. What I think trends it into a negative direction is, remember, not only do you have to give Jacksonville a first-round pick, you also got to pay him top-of-the-line money. And I just can't see the Eagles doing that. And then they have body deficiency because they lose another draft pick. So I still say it's very, very unlikely that they would move their first-round pick.
Yeah, I wouldn't kill him for doing it, John. You kind of talked about it, 24 years old at that position. And the reason is, in round 2 and 3, I feel like I can still – so one of the questions I was going to ask you was, the offseason has been totally defense. It's been all defense so far. And I guess that means, hey, for the draft, we're going to get younger on the offensive side of the ball. But for free agency, we're going to, and that means if I trade my first-round pick to get a 24-year-old end, I still can get a receiver in 2 and 3 that I feel pretty good about. That's why I feel pretty good about giving up that first-round pick. But I understand the tough spot that Howie is in, especially after saying, well, we need to get younger and we have all these draft picks.
Yeah, and you rarely do you have that type of decision. And by the way, from Jacksonville's standpoint, everyone assumes they would deal him for a first-round pick, and they probably would. But you do have to add in one thing I didn't mention. You also have to add in the fact that if you look about your salary cap assets at the position, you already have Brandon Graham, who's highly paid. You already have Derek Barnett as a former first-round pick. You're already paying 3 defensive tackles, 8 figures. So that's a lot of money on the defensive line. It's obviously something the Eagles value, but the preference is that some of those guys are a little bit more cost-effective. So that also points it in a little bit of a negative direction as well. The last thing I'll say, people talk about this draft and the wide receivers and how deep it is, and it is. Every draft person I've talked to inside this league, forget about the people online, people in the league say this is the best receiving core we've seen in at least a couple decades. But you also have to at least weigh in. We just talked about a former first-round pick that failed miserably, essentially, here. You drafted a wide receiver in the second round last year that did nothing. So to assume that this organization and their history at that position is going to draft a receiver, even in this year's draft, in the second or third round, and those guys are going to develop, never mind hit the ground running and be impactful this season, that might be pie in the sky.
Yeah, great point. I mean, just because there's a lot of them doesn't mean you're going to hit on the one that you take. We've seen that before, too, where there was a lot of depth, and you happened to get the wrong guy. It happened last year so far. Let's not count J.J. out. But, yeah, there was a lot of guys who did succeed around J.J., and J.J. did not succeed so far. John McMullen's with us, Football at 4. Rasul Douglas, apparently, they're trying to move him, which I guess isn't a surprise, but I would ask this question. Are they just trying to unload this guy for, hey, I'll take peanuts, like 7th-round pick me? Because I'd rather have Douglas. I know what he is as a guy as opposed to what I'm getting with that 7th-round pick. And I don't know that there's even any concrete, what they would be looking for. But what would be a fair return for Rasul Douglas?
Well, the only thing you're going to get is a late-round pick. You would hope it would be more of a 6, maybe a condition on it to get it up to a 5 if he plays a lot. But, yeah, you're not going to get a lot in return unless you're getting maybe another younger player who's on the outs in another organization. You go player for player. Either way, it's not going to be significant. What it tells you is that the Eagles have made their minds. This guy is not in their long-term plan. So he's entering the final year of his rookie deal. So essentially he's going to leave anyway next year. So you try to cop as much as you can get. But clearly the Eagles are looking differently on the outside, and they're hopeful that Sidney Jones can take that step forward, I think, and be that second corner outside behind Darius Slay. And then you have Avonte Maddox inside to play the nickel. If Jones falters again, then I think Avonte moves outside and they play Cre'Von LeBlanc in the slot. I think that's how the Eagles are moving forward. And I expect to add a body as well in the draft, pretty high, might be second, third round in that range. So there's going to be another body, I think, in that mix. But by peddling Rasul, it tells you they've already made the decision that long-term he's not going to be here, so you might as well get something in return.
All right, so after the first wave of free agency, what do the tea leaves say for 21?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think this team is a significant contender. I think we are in a transformative phase. Remember, they're going through this transition where you have a star quarterback on the cost-effective rookie deal. Now you're moving into the star quarterback getting his big contract. So we've always talked about this a lot, Mike. Russell Wilson, Seattle, perfect example. You try to take advantage by signing veteran players when they're on that rookie deal. As you get into that second contract, you have to have a different roster philosophy. You got to go younger, and that's all Howie's consistently said. As I said, both in front of the camera, behind the camera, we got to get younger, we got to get younger, we got to get younger. And that's the phase the Eagles are in. And a large part of it has to do with not only those veteran players aging out, but the fact now you have to pay the quarterback a lot of money.
Crazy times with the world that we're living in. The NFL still moving and shaking, and things are happening, and we'll see it all unfold. By the way, the NFL draft has been I guess they're not doing it in Vegas now. They're going to just kind of do it from a studio and have all the teams kind of war rooms set up all over the place. So that has now changed as well. We'll have more football at 4. Javon Hargrave is speaking right now, and John McMullen, of course, football at 4, like all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thank you, guys.